So where is it and when was it inhabited? Well, we know that there's only one reference to Mecca. That's in chapter 48, verse 24. And this is what it says. And he it is who hath withheld men's hand from you, and hath withheld your hands from them, in the valley of Mecca, after he had made you victors over them. Allah is seer of what you do. In the valley of Mecca. So the one thing we know geographical about Mecca, it's in a valley. Is that true? Have you looked at the Kaaba today? Have you looked at Mecca today? Is it in a valley? No, it's not. It's not in a valley. Ooh, you think that's bad? Let's continue on. Look what else we know about Mecca. We know quite a bit from the traditions, and we also know quite a bit from the Quran. If, of course, these references to where the Prophet lived, where the representative of God lived, is Mecca. Let's just put Mecca in there into every one of these references, okay? Now, remember, none of these verses that I'm going to refer to down below has the word Mecca in it at all. Okay?
Okay.
Look at chapter 3, verse 96. The first sanctuary appointed for mankind was that at Becca. Is that Mecca? No, it's not. Becca is a completely different word with completely different consonants. Look at the first consonant. It's with a ba, not a mim. It's with a b. Can you see a problem right there? Because we know where Becca is. That's a well-known place. In fact, there are 3 Beccas. Becca Valley is well-known. That's up in Lebanon. That's a biblical place. So that can't be Mecca. This place where the Prophet lived is the mother of all settlements. Now, Muslims say, that's Mecca. Why? Because Muhammad lived there. In chapter 6, verse 92, in chapter 42, verse 7. Well, if it says so, then why didn't they use the word Mecca there? Mecca is not found there. We also know, chapter 7, verse 24 that I talked about earlier, is that when Adam and Eve were thrown out of the Garden of Eden, which is way up in space, that Adam was, according to the traditions, not the Quran, but according to the traditions, that Adam was thrown down to Kerala in southern India, and Eve was thrown down to Mecca, according to traditions, 9th and 10th century traditions, right? So Adam was in India, Eve was up in Mecca. According to traditions, Adam got up when he was thrown down. It's obvious that God did not know how to aim very well. So he threw Eve down to Mecca, and he threw Adam, got him off, and he landed up in India. What does Adam do? Wow. He gets up and he strides up and he walks up and gets up and walks up to Mecca. Now stop and think. How do you stride and walk up to Mecca unless you're probably 200 to 300 feet tall? The idea of him striding and making his way up to Mecca, that's thousands of miles away. Look on a map again. When Muslims read these stories, they don't think through how stupid a lot of these stories are. They just make no sense, right? Let's go to Abraham. Abraham in 1900 BC. How do we know that he's lived in 1900 BC? Because the Bible tells us so. The Quran never says so, but it says that he was there in the Masjid al-Haram, and he cleans out all the idols. The next morning, the people come and they throw him into a fiery pit, thinking that he had destroyed the idols. That's in chapter 21, verses 51 to 71. Now, as I said, Abraham was nowhere near Mecca at all. He never lived that far south. He was either in Euphrates Valley, or if you come across, he was all the way over to Haran, way over in what is Haran up the north, or where you go down to where we see now where Israel is today. That was 600 miles to 1,000 miles further north. What about the Qibla? Well, you've heard me what I've said about the Qibla. Have you noticed that according to chapter 2, verse 149 to 150, that it was redirected from Jerusalem down to the Masjid al-Haram? In chapter 2, verse 149 to 150, does not use the word Mecca at all. It's not there in the Arabic. Mecca is not there. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
It just does the Masjid al-Haram. Well, that could be anywhere. Every town had a Masjid al-Haram. Every town had a Kaaba. Dr. Hitti, who did his, he did his great work on the history of the Arabs, he goes and shows that Taif had a Kaaba, but Yathrib had a Kaaba, Khaybar had a Kaaba, Tabuk had a Kaaba. They all had Kaabas.
So many Kaabas.
Hundreds of Kaabas. Every city had its Kaaba. Petra had a Kaaba. You can see it today. You can see the outlines of the Kaaba. Dan Gibson found out when he did the measurements on the Kaaba in Petra that it fits exactly with what the traditions that you find from the Islamic traditions. The Islamic traditions, which give the dimensions of the Kaaba, fit the Petran Kaaba perfectly. But the Meccan Kaaba that we use, that is used today, the dimensions of that Kaaba is too small. It's smaller than what the traditions say, proving that the traditions, an Azraqi who wrote it, in the 9th century, was referring to the Petra of Kaaba, not the Kaaba in Mecca. So you can see the Qibla. Now can you understand why when Dan Gibson from 1979 up until 2004, when he went to mosque after mosque after mosque, he went to over 100 mosques. He was the first one in history to do that. The great scholar of the Qibla, the world's authority on the Qibla, Dr. David King, who is considered to be the scholar, the best mind on the Qibla. Qibla means the direction of prayer.
Yeah.
When he did all of his research, and he only did his research in libraries, he never went to any of these Kaabas. He only went to one mosque in his whole career. One mosque.
Wow.
That was
Just
the one in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. That's it. He only went to the Uzbeki mosque. One in his whole career. And yet he is the world authority on the Qibla. How stupid can you be? Can you see? How can you be the world authority and never have gone to any of these mosques that you're talking about? Dan Gibson is not a scholar, doesn't have any degree behind his name, but he lived amongst the people, learned the languages, and he went from mosque to mosque to mosque to mosque, and he used aster satellite imagery coming from space to find the exact coordinates for every one of the Qiblas. No one had done that before. No one had done that before. And guess what he found? None of the Qiblas. None. That includes the Qiblatain Mosque in Medina. That includes all the mosques in Yemen and in Israel, all the way as far over as the Canton Mosque, the Guangzhou Mosque in China, the Sherman Mosque in southern India, in Kerala. All these mosques that are thousands of miles away, and they were all being built in the 7th century, in 636, 636, 642, 670, 682, 690, up until 706. 706. Look at the date. That's the 8th century, right? 706. Muhammad died in 632, right?
Yeah.
The Qibla was canonized in 624. Am I correct? The Qibla was canonized in 624. That's the time that, according to chapter 2, verse 149 to 150 that I just quoted, that's when it was redirected down to, supposedly from Jerusalem down to Mecca. That's what Muslims tell us. Yet every mosque up until 706, every mosque was facing Petra. Facing Petra. That's way up in Jordan. That's 600 miles further north. That's where the people of Thamud live. That's where the people of Ud live. That's where the people of the Midianites live. They live up there. Every mosque. Because the Qiblas are still there today. They're just ruins, but you can see the wall. You can there look at the wall, and you can look from space down onto the wall and look and see exactly where they're directed. And every mosque is facing Petra up until 706. So when was the first mosque that he found? When was the first mosque facing Mecca? Do you know the date? You probably don't. 727. 727.
727.
In Bhadbha, in Pakistan. The very first mosque that is facing Mecca is not till 727. Muhammad died in 632. Abraham was supposed to have been there in 1900 BC. Adam and Eve were supposed to have been there in the beginning of time. And not one mosque is facing Mecca until 722. Can you see how this just destroys everything about Islam and everything about their traditions and everything about Mecca? Now, when did all the mosques face Mecca? And from that time, they have all faced Mecca? Not till 822. Some say not till 876, because there's still some they think that have been found that are after 822 up until 876. That's the late 9th century that they're still facing Petra or in between, or the parallel mosques that Dan talks about. There are 4 Qiblas that he found, not just one, not just 2, but 4 Qiblas. I'm not going to get into that today. What I'm looking at is Mecca. Why is it they don't begin to face Mecca until 727? That's 100 years after Muhammad. Can you see? This is a problem, Muslims, and you've got to deal with this. And thank God I don't have to defend this. Thank God I don't have to give an answer to this. So let's move on. That's just the first problem, right? Now,
Yeah.
what other reference do we have? Well, let's go and let's see what else we found. Let's look and see what the traditions, and also what not only just the traditions, but also what. Oh, I've got a mistake here. I can see I've got to change that when I finish this. But let's look and see what the traditions say. The traditions talk about Mecca. Now, by the time the traditions are written down, Ibn Ishaq, forget Ibn Ishaq. He never wrote a thing that we know of. It's Ibn Hisham. That should be Ibn Hisham. Whenever you see Ibn Ishaq, that should be Ibn Hisham. That's a typo.
Yeah.
I forgot to put Hisham's name. We're talking about this book right here. This is the book that it's attributed to him. So it says Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq didn't write one word of this book. Nothing.
Okay, I can see that, but I'm not sure that the audience can see it because your slide is on. So if you want them to see it, you can actually. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
All right, so that's the book Dr. J is talking about, the life of Muhammad.
And it says here, it's this is the translation by Alfred Guillaume. This comes from Ibn Hisham. It does not come from Ibn Ishaq. The reason why he's written Ibn Ishaq there is because of pressure by the Muslims. The Muslims are demanding that they use the word Ibn Ishaq, because Ibn Ishaq would have written this in 765. Ibn Hisham actually wrote this in 833. That's why this is he's being politically correct. But that's a lie. That's a lie. Ibn Ishaq has nothing to do with this book. We don't know anything from Ibn Ishaq. Nothing exists from Ibn Ishaq. Nothing has been retained today from 765. Okay, that's a whole nother problem we're not going to get into right now.
Yeah, I'm hearing that for the very first time, so I think we have to bring you some other time to engage that.
I've never told you this before. Oh my.
No.
Oh goodness, we have a lot yet to learn. Yeah, everything we know about Muhammad's life comes from this book. This is the first reference to his biography.
Yeah.
Very thick. It's very thick. How many pages is it? I'll tell you right now. It is a huge book. It's over 800 pages. These 800 pages have nothing to do with Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq didn't write one word of this. But Muslims want you to believe that. And so Muslims demand that Alfred Guillaume and all the Europeans who have done the translation for this book, because this was written in Arabic, this was only written in 833, not 765. That's 70 years later, which makes it a real problem for Muslims, because that means for 200 years, no one knew about this man, Muhammad. Listen, Korede, we could go on for hours just on this, but let's get back to Mecca, okay?
Yeah.
That's for another time.
No problem.
I'll come back again and we'll do that. We'll do that at another time, okay? So let me share screen again. Let's get back to this, because we have a lot. We need to get through all this. Now, what the traditions say, what Ibn Hisham, Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, all of them say is this, that this place, now that it is called Mecca, because Mecca was well known by the mid-8th century. By 749, Mecca now was chosen. And we know that it was chosen by the Abbasids. The Abbasids are the ones that choose Mecca. And they change the location of the sanctuary from Petra, and they bring it down to Mecca. So Mecca from 749 on is well known. Okay, here's Ibn Hisham. He's writing in 833, and he says that it's in a valley and it has a parallel valley. Well, you can see there are some problems here. Why would he be saying that when Mecca doesn't have a valley or in a parallel valley? He's referring to earlier traditions. So he's taken, remember, what did Ibn Hisham and what did Al-Bukhari do? They were given all these traditions from earlier times, and they were to whittle them down and throw out that which was erroneous. So he threw out everything that Ibn Ishaq said and only retained what he wanted. But of course, he just wrote down what these earlier traditions said. And these earlier traditions are all talking about Petra. But they don't want the name Petra there, so they put Mecca in there without realizing that there's some historical problems here, including this one right here. Al-Bukhari then talks about that it has a stream going through it. There are no streams in Mecca. None whatsoever. According to Sahih, to Surah 37, and outside the ruins, in fact, 2 different times in the Quran, it refers to the fact that the prophet goes outside, and when he goes outside, he passes the pillar of salt, referring to the pillar of salt of Lot's wife from the time of Abraham, from 1900 BC. There's no way that Lot's wife or that Lot himself could have been living that far south. If there was any place that salt would have been, it would have been right outside of Petra today. What is Jordan? That it has fields, that it has trees, that this place where the prophet lived has grass, has fruit, has clay, has loam. Hold on a minute. Look at Mecca. There are no trees, grass, fruit, clay, or loam. There may be today, but they've all been transported in. Why? It's one of the most arid places on earth. There's only one well there called the Zamzam well. And no one has been able to look to see if that well is very old. I imagine it's a very new well, because almost all the water that has to be brought into Mecca has to be transformed in from the Red Sea. They had to desalinate it, and they have to then for all the pilgrims. There's no water there. There's no cisterns there. Mecca is one of the driest places on earth. Therefore, it would not have had trees, grass, fruit, clay, loam. Look at the old pictures of Mecca. Whenever you look at the pictures from the 1900s or the 1800s, look at it.
Yeah.
It is as arid a place as you could find, with no vegetation whatsoever. And then it says that according to Sahih 6, Surah 6, and Surah 16, that there are olive trees there. There are no olive trees in Arabia. The only olive trees that can be grown are way up in the Mediterranean, which is 600 miles further north. And then it says that there have mountains overlooking the Kaaba, looking down onto the Kaaba. Look at any picture of Mecca. There are no mountains there looking down on the Kaaba. So Mecca is not in a valley. It has none of these listed above, because it is just too arid and it is just too dry. Real problem here. So Dr. Patricia Kroner wanted to find out, well, then if there's no reference to Mecca anywhere, when does the reference to Mecca first appear? So she scoured all the documentations, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th century. Guess when she found her first reference to Mecca? There it is right on the screen. The Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius Continuato Byzantia Arabica. The date 741. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Wow.
Muhammad was supposed to have been there born there in 570, died and will live there until 622. Went back and reconquered it in 630. And yet the first reference we can find anywhere on any documentation is 741. 741, during the reign of Caliph Hisham. The earliest time we can find it on any map is not till 900 AD. That's the 10th century.
Wow.
Now, Krona in her work said that Greek trading documents refer to the towns of Taif and Yathrib and Chayb, but never to Mecca. There are no references to Mecca in any of these documents. She went back and she found documents from Ctesiphon. That is what is modern day Baghdad. And these are Greek documents. And Pahlavi documents, which means Persian documents. And here the people in Ctesiphon were sent down, these trading groups way down to Yathrib. And when they got to Yathrib, they found silver down there. So they went and started up silver mines all around Yathrib. Silver in Yathrib. And they went down, these documents talking them going down to Taif and down to Najran and going up to Tabuk and Khaybar, but no reference in any of these documents, these Persian documents, of any place called Mecca. And yet Mecca's right next door. It's just southwest of Yathrib and just northwest of Taif, down off the tribe. So you can see these are real problems. She's looking at documents from that era. Now, what's interesting, she didn't read the entire inscription. If she'd read the entire inscription from Methodius, Continuato Byzantia Arabica from 741, if she read the second half of it, it says, as they consider it, that's Mecca, as they consider it, the home of Abraham, which lies in the desert between Ur of the Chaldees and Kara, the city of Mesopotamia. Wait a minute, hold on a minute. Take a look on a map where that is. There's Ur, which is just north of Edessa, and where Abraham came from was Haran. According to the people in the 8th century, they believe Abraham came from there. We know today that's wrong, because now we've discovered Ur. That was just discovered in 1853 by G.E. Taylor, the British discoverer. He discovered the city of Ur in 1853, and that is now today in Iraq. But back in the 8th century, this is where they thought that Abraham lived. But when you look and see where that is, that's in southern Turkey. That's way up north, hundreds of miles further north, proving that they've got the wrong Mecca, even in that inscription. Well, not the Mecca they have the right Mecca, but that's the first Mecca. That's the earlier Mecca. That's not the Mecca that we know today, because nowhere anybody, no Muslim listening to us would believe that Mecca existed in southern Turkey. Too far north, once again, but directly above the present-day Mecca. And the original Mecca was located in southern Turkey or south of Edessa. Now, let's look at modern Mecca today. When you look at Mecca today, you see that huge building. I don't know if you've seen pictures. That is the 4th highest building in the world, that clock tower. Okay, it's known as Abraj Al Bayt Tower. Let's just call it the Al Bayt Tower. Okay, the Al Bayt Towers, and there's more than one. There's about 7 or 8 big buildings that are built all around it. They are huge hotels, air-conditioned hotels for very wealthy Muslims when they come to the Hajj, and they're looking right down onto the Kaaba there. Can you see the Kaaba? There's no mountains looking down on the Kaaba there.
Yeah.
Can you see any mountains looking down on it? No, but there are buildings that are like mountains today. So they're trying to recreate the very thing that the Quran talks about. It's the world's largest clock. It has 45 feet across, and it's then designed the same way as Big Ben in London. There you can see a picture of Big Ben and that clock right at the bottom there. Now,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
what they want to make Mecca to look like. Take a look at that. It's all going to be cemented over. It's going to be a huge place.
Wow.
That's future. Today, this is what it looks like today.
Wow.
Well, this is actually about 2 years old now. What do you notice? There are cranes everywhere, right? When you build buildings,
Yeah.
you need cranes. But take a look at what they're cementing over. The Prophet's birth home is now being cemented over and destroyed. Khadija, his wife, home has been destroyed to make places for these buildings. They're just destroying the history. They don't even care about the Prophet anymore there in Mecca. But what's most important is when you build large buildings like that, 4th highest in the world, enormously tall buildings, what's the first thing you need to do? You need to build foundations. You need to dig holes into the ground. Am I correct?
That's true.
So when you dig holes in the ground, what happens when you dig holes in any ancient city in the ground? You come across
You make discoveries. Exactly.
discovery after discovery. And the archaeologists come to the building sites and they say, give us anything you find. And that's what you go to London, you go to Athens, you go to any ancient city, you go to even Baghdad. And whenever they build these large buildings, the archaeologists are there because the builders are doing their job for them. They're actually digging much deeper than the archaeologists can dig, and they're going back and recreating. They take the artifacts and then they recreate the history of the city. And that's exactly what they should be doing here. So Dan Gibson was at a conference in 2009 when these buildings were being built. And at the conference there in Arabia, he went to the archaeologists that were there. It was an archaeological conference, and he asked them, what have you found? You're there. What have you found? And they kind of looked sheepishly at him and they said, well, we've not found a thing. Zero. Not a thing. Except they found an Ottoman fort from about 1299 AD. 1299. That's the oldest thing they could find in Mecca. The oldest thing that has now been uncovered from all this building that's going on. What does that tell you, Korede?
Something is actually wrong somewhere. I mean, like you said, if this is the city we're talking about, we should have been discovering things more ancient. In fact, we should be able to go back to the 7th century, the time of Muhammad. But if we can't find anything that has to go way back to that period, probably we're in the wrong place.
We should be able to find we should be able to find artifacts all the way back to Abraham. Don't stop there.
Yeah,
all the way back to Adam and Eve. If this is the oldest city in the world, then why aren't we finding artifacts that go all the way back to Adam and Eve? You're saying nothing of Abraham in 1900. You see, the oldest thing they can find so far is 1299 AD, not BC, AD.
Wow.
That's only 800 years ago. Only 800 years ago.